I remember exactly where I was when the alert came in, not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it was terrifyingly calm. A quiet update. A subtle shift in numbers. A trajectory line bending in a way it should not. He had spent years believing that interstellar visitors were rare, silent travelers, drifting through our solar system like forgotten messengers. We had seen them before, like Oumuamua in 2017 and 2/Borisov in 2019, strange but passive, obeying gravity even if they defied easy explanation. But this one was different. This one was named 3/Atlas, and from the first moment we tracked it, something felt wrong. I watched as telescopes across the globe, including NASA-linked survey systems and the Atlas Observatory Network, locked onto the object. It was moving fast, far faster than typical solar system bodies, confirming what we feared and hoped at the same time. This was not from here. This object was born around another star, shaped by another cosmic history, and now it had entered our neighborhood. I felt off first. Tenanis. Because interstellar objects are supposed to pass through, untouched, unchanged, indifferent to us. But 3/Atlas did not behave like a cosmic tourist. As the data refined, its path became clearer, and that was when my stomach dropped. Instead of following a smooth hyperbolic curve, the kind we expect from objects not bound to the sun, its trajectory subtly adjusted. Not dramatically. Not enough for headlines at first. But enough that anyone who understood orbital mechanics felt the chill. Natural objects do not do this. Rocks do not hesitate. Easy does not correct course. I leaned back, staring at the simulated solar system model glowing in the dark. The sun burned at the center. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, all tracing their ancient paths. And then there was 3/Atlas, a faint marker from interstellar space, doing something I never expected to witness in my lifetime. It was losing speed. Not from solar radiation alone. Not from gravitational interaction alone. It was as if it were responding. NASA scientists are trained to doubt first. To es un error. Calibration mistakes. Sensor noise. I told myself the same thing. We ran the numbers again. Different instruments. Different teams. The conclusion did not change. The object had undergone a measurable, unexplained deceleration. Not enough to stop. Not enough to threaten. But enough to rewrite assumptions. He thought about how far it had traveled. Light years of darkness. Stellar explosions. Radiation storms. Galactic tides. This thing had survived all of it, only to arrive here, now, and do the impossible right in front of us. The idea made my chest feel tight. Space had always felt vast and empty, a place where nothing notices anything else. But 3/Atlas felt aware, not in a conscious sense, but in a way that suggested intention embedded in physics we do not yet understand. Images began to sharpen. It was not smooth. Not symmetrical. Its shape was irregular, elongated, almost scarred. Sunlight reflected unevenly, producing brightness variations that didn't match typical tumbling asteroids. Some suggested outgassing, like a comet, but no clear tail appeared. No plume. No explanation that fit cleanly into known categories. It existed in between definitions, and that scared me more than any clear answer. I imagined the object as it crossed the heliopause, entering the influence of our sun for the first time. A boundary humanity has barely touched with Voyager 1 and 2. And yet this thing crossed it effortlessly, as if it had done this before, as if star systems were just doors along a hallway it had been walking for millions of years. When the phrase started circulating quietly, non-gravitational acceleration, I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. That phrase had haunted us since Oumuamua, sparking debates about exotic ice, hydrogen outgassing, even artificial origins. We promised ourselves we would be ready next time. Better instruments. Faster response. Clearer answers. Now the next time had arrived, and instead of clarity, we had something more unsettling. Because 3/Atlas did not just drift. It adjusted. And in space, adjustment implies energy. Energy implies a source. And that implication lingered in my mind like a low-frequency hum I could not shut off. I looked at Earth's orbit highlighted in blue on the screen. There was no danger. No collision course. No immediate threat. And yet, I felt smaller than I ever had. Not because we were in danger, but because the universe had just reminded us that we do not understand it as well as we pretend. Something had entered our solar system and refused to behave like an object. In that moment, I realized this was not just a discovery. It was a message, not written in words, but in motion. A reminder that the rules we trust are provisional, and that the cosmos still holds surprises capable of humbling an entire civilization in a single, silent minute. And as the data kept streaming in, I knew one thing with certainty. This was only the beginning. The next few hours felt unreal, like time had stretched thin under the weight of discovery. I watched as NASA teams shifted from quiet curiosity to controlled urgency. This was no longer just an interstellar object passing through our cosmic backyard. This was an anomaly demanding attention. Every available telescope was pointed toward 3/diagonal Atlas, from ground-based observatories to space-based assets designed to stare into the deepest darkness. The universe had whispered something strange, and now humanity was leaning in to listen. He could feel the tension even through the sterile language of data updates. Engineers recalibrated instruments. Astrophysicists argued gently but intensely over models and assumptions. The question hanging in the air was simple and terrifying. What could cause an object, drifting between stars, to change its behavior after entering our solar system? Solar radiation pressure could explain small deviations, but not this. Gravitational interactions were predictable, but this was not. Something was missing from the equation. As higher-resolution images arrived, my sense of unease deepened. The surface of 3/diagonal Atlas appeared unusually dark, absorbing sunlight rather than reflecting it. Darker than most known asteroids. Darker even than typical comets. This meant it was heating up more efficiently, storing energy in ways we did not yet understand. CERMIL models suggested internal activity, but without visible outgassing. It was as if the object was breathing without exhaling. He thought about the Voyager probes, humanity's farthest travelers, now drifting through interstellar space with golden records strapped to their sides. They carry our voices, our music, our proof that we exist. And yet here was something else, older, faster, and infinitely more mysterious, passing through without announcement, without permission. We had sent our messengers into the dark, but now the dark had sent something back. NASA's planetary defense teams joined the analysis, not because there was danger, but because uncertainty demands preparation. Every new calculation reinforced the same conclusion. The object's motion could not be fully explained by known natural processes. That did not mean it was artificial. It meant our understanding was incomplete. And that realization hit me harder than fear ever could. We are a species built on confidence in our equations. When those equations fail, the ground beneath our certainty cracks. Then came the spectral data. Light broken into its component colors, revealing chemical fingerprints etched into the object's surface. What we saw did not match typical solar system materials. There were hints of exotic compounds, possibly formed in environments far colder or more energetic than anything near our sun. This object was a fossil from another stellar nursery, carrying chemistry shaped by alien suns. He imagined its journey. Born in chaos. Flung outward by gravitational violence as planets formed around its home star. Cast into the endless night, where a single mistake could mean destruction by collision or erosion by radiation. And yet it survived. Not only survived, but arrived here intact enough to surprise us. That alone felt impossible. As hours turned into a full day, a subtle realization settled over me. The impossible thing 3/diagonal Atlas had done was not just physical. It had crossed a psychological boundary. For centuries, space was something we observed from afar. Even our probes, brave as they are, move slowly, cautiously. This object shattered that illusion of distance. Interstellar space was not unreachable. It was active. Dynamic. Connected. I found myself staring at Earth's pale dot representation again. A fragile orbit around an average star in a quiet spiral arm of the Milky Way. We often speak about searching for life out there, scanning exoplanets for atmospheres and biosignatures. But 3/diagonal Atlas reminded me of something more unsettling. We may not need to search forever. Sometimes, the universe comes to us. NASA scientists emphasized restraint. No wild conclusions. No dramatic announcements. And yet, behind closed doors, I knew the conversations were changing. Missions were being discussed. Intercept trajectories. Rapid response probes. Concepts once considered science fiction suddenly felt urgent. The question was no longer if we should study future interstellar objects up close. It was how fast we could be ready before the next one arrived. As night fell, I stepped outside and looked up. The stars felt different. Not colder. Not hostile. Used closer. Somewhere out there, beyond what my eyes could see, Diagonal Atlas was moving silently, carrying secrets older than humanity itself. It did not glow. It did not announce its presence. But it had already changed us. Because once you realize that objects from other star systems can enter ours and refuse to behave as expected, you can never look at the sky the same way again. The universe stops being a backdrop. It becomes an active participant. And deep down, a thought began to form that I could not ignore. If this object could do the impossible once, what else might it do next? The room went quiet in a way I had never experienced before. Not the calm of confidence, but the silence that follows when everyone realizes the same truth at the same time. He was staring at a refined trajectory model, the kind built only after countless hours of cross-checking and debate. This was no longer raw data. This was the best understanding humanity had of Diagonal Atlas, and it was telling a story none of us were prepared to hear. The object was not just slowing down. It was aligning. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Space is full of apparent patterns that dissolve under scrutiny. But the alignment persisted. As Diagonal Atlas passed deeper into the solar system, its path began to correlate with the plane of the planets. Not perfectly. Not dramatically. But enough to raise eyebrows and, eventually, voices. Interstellar objects should slice through at random angles, relics of chaotic ejections from distant stars. This one was behaving as if it were learning the layout of our system as it went. NASA's navigation specialists recalculated everything. Solar radiation pressure. Jarkovsky effects. Thermal recoil. We stacked explanation upon explanation, hoping the anomaly would vanish. It did not. The residuals remained, small but stubborn, like a fingerprint that refused to be wiped away. I felt a tightness in my chest as I realized what that meant. We were not dealing with bad data. We were dealing with new physics or a new category of object. I thought about the Artemis program, about humanity's renewed push to return to the moon and eventually reach Mars. We speak confidently about becoming a multi-planet species, about expanding into the solar system. And yet, here was something from beyond that system, moving through it with a grace we did not understand. It made our ambitions feel both brave and painfully naive. Then came the simulation that changed everything for me. A long-term projection, stretching decades into the future, mapping where Diagonal Atlas would go after its closest approach to the Sun. Interstellar objects are expected to leave, flung back into the void on hyperbolic paths. But in this model, something unexpected happened. Under a narrow set of conditions, the object could become temporarily bound. Not captured forever. But slowed enough to linger. I remember swallowing hard as the implications sank in an interstellar visitor that stays. Not as a threat. Not as an invader. But as a presence. A cosmic guest that refuses to leave on schedule. The idea felt surreal, like watching a shooting star stop mid-sky and decide to orbit instead. The room buzzed with cautious conversation. No one used dramatic language. But the excitement was impossible to hide. If an object like this could be studied over years instead of weeks, it would revolutionize planetary science. We could analyze material formed around another star without sending a probe across light years. The universe had, in effect, delivered a sample to our doorstep. Still, I could not shake the unease. Because lingering implies interaction. And interaction implies exchange. Not just of energy or momentum, but of knowledge. We would learn from it, yes. But what did it learn from us as it passed through the Sun's influence, bathing in electromagnetic noise, planetary magnetic fields, and the faint radio whispers of a technological civilization? As the calculation stabilized, one fact became undeniable. 3/diagonal Atlas had done something no confirmed interstellar object had done before. It had demonstrated behavior consistent with adaptability. Not intelligence. Not intention. But responsiveness. And in the cold logic of physics, that was astonishing enough. He thought back to how humanity once believed the heavens were perfect and unchanging. Then we discovered craters, collisions, chaos. Now, we were confronting another shift in perspective. The boundary between solar systems was not a hard wall. It was porous. And things could cross it carrying surprises we are only beginning to recognize. Late that night, I found myself alone with the data, the hum of computers filling the space. I felt a strange gratitude mixed with dread. Gratitude for being alive at a time when such mysteries unfold in real time. Dread because mysteries, once revealed, often lead to questions we cannot easily answer. 3/diagonal Atlas continued its silent journey, indifferent to our debates and fears. But it had already changed our trajectory as a species. It forced us to admit that the universe is more interconnected, more dynamic, and more unpredictable than we ever imagined. And as the final model rendered on my screen, one thought echoed in my mind. If this object could align, slow, and linger, then the story of interstellar visitors was just beginning. By the time we reached this stage, fear was no longer sharp. It was dull, heavy, and constant, like gravity itself. The kind of fear that doesn't make you panic, but makes you think more carefully about every assumption you have ever trusted. 3/diagonal Atlas was still silent, still dark, still refusing to behave like anything we had catalogued before. And that silence was becoming the loudest part of the story. NASA's radio science teams began doing what they always do when confronted with the unknown. They listened. Not for messages, not for voices, but for disturbances. Teeny fluctuations in radio waves. Minute interactions between the object and the solar wind. Subtle electromagnetic effects that most objects ignore entirely. This was not a search for intelligence. It was a search for reaction. He watched the charts form in real time. Flat lines. Noise. Static. Then, something changed. It wasn't a signal in the way movies teach us to expect. No pulses. No repeating patterns. Used to distortion. A faint, measurable interaction between 3/diagonal Atlas and the surrounding plasma environment that did not align with its size or mass. The object was influencing space around it more than it should have been able to. Not aggressively. Not violently. But persistently. I felt my breath slow as I realized what this implied. Space is not empty. It is a fabric of particles, fields, and forces. Most objects pass through it like stones through air. This one seemed to press back. Engineers debated thermal effects. Charged dust. Unusual material composition. Every explanation was explored, and each one explained part of the behavior, but never all of it. The models grew more complex, not simpler. And complexity is a warning sign in science. It means you are missing something fundamental. He thought about how humanity first discovered gravity, not by understanding it, but by noticing its effects. Apples falling. Planets bending their paths. We didn't know what gravity was, only what it did. Now, once again, we were watching effects without understanding the cause. And history told me that moments like this changed civilizations. As days passed, 3/diagonal Atlas reached its closest approach to the Sun. Temperatures on its surface soared to levels that should have triggered visible changes. Outgassing. Fragmentation. Structural stress. But the object remained intact. No flare. No dramatic response. Used endurance. That, more than anything, unsettled me. Survival under those conditions suggested materials we had barely studied, formed under pressures and temperatures beyond our experience. For the first time, I caught myself wondering not where it came from, but why it survived. Nature does not preserve things without reason. Survival is selective, even in space. Whatever forces shaped 3/diagonal Atlas had refined it for a journey that most objects never complete. He stepped outside again that night, looking up at a sky that felt suddenly crowded. The stars were the same, but my relationship with them had changed. Somewhere between those points of light, paths crossed. Stories overlapped. The universe was no longer a series of isolated systems. It was a network. NASA leadership remained careful with public statements. Words like anomaly, unexpected, and under investigation dominated every briefing. But beneath that restraint, something profound was happening. Funding discussions shifted. Mission concepts accelerated. Interstellar interception was no longer theoretical. It was inevitable. Because now we knew the impossible was not only possible, it had already happened. The object began its slow departure phase, drifting outward again, still influenced by the sun, still refusing to follow a simple exit path. And as it did, one final realization settled in my mind. 3/diagonal Atlas was not an answer. It was a question. A test of whether we were capable of humility in the face of the unknown. We had spent decades searching the universe for signs that we were not alone, scanning distant worlds for faint chemical hints. But this encounter suggested a different truth. The universe does not always announce itself with clarity. Sometimes, it whispers through anomalies, through things that almost make sense but never quite do. As I returned to the data one last time that night, I felt a mix of awe and responsibility. We were witnesses to something rare, perhaps historic. And how we responded would define not just our science, but our philosophy. Because if interstellar space can send us objects that challenge our understanding so deeply, then the universe is not passive. It is engaged. Observing. Interacting. And as 3/diagonal Atlas slipped farther away, carrying its secrets back into the dark, I could not escape one final thought. What if this was not a coincidence, but a preview?